Theology of Rhythm podcast. My name is Reagan Canington, and this is our first episode of the show, and so I kind of wanted to dive a little bit into what the podcast is actually going to be about and what we're going to be talking about throughout the whole show in its entirety. And then I had one big subject that I wanted to dive into, but first, to introduce the show, this show would be for people that are playing in church music, that are singing, that are wanting to join a church band, and I want people to see from this show that musicianship is central to worship, and that theology and the way you see God is connected so tight to your playing of your instrument and leading at your church, and how what we do on stage is actually shaping the way the congregation is seeing God and how they're seeing Him in the moment during worship. We will pretty regularly talk about things like spiritual formation through worship, serving the song. There'll be a lot of theological talks and also a lot of practical talks of what it means to serve the song, how to play the right notes, what's the best gear, things like that, but also what's the philosophy behind worship? How do we better connect to other musicians during worship? What does it look like to worship? What does worship mean? Lots of big subjects like that, and also other talks talking about best kind of gear to buy, what's the best rudiments to practice, what's the best way to go about singing this song. Certain things like that. I also want to talk about that even though a lot of worship services these days can look like a rock show, and a lot of them can just be these big productions, that it's not about the visual, it's not about what's being played, it's not about the right notes, it's about the heart of it. And we're going to dive into that a lot today, actually. But it's not about what church puts on the best light show. It's not about which church has the best EQ or the best sound system. It all comes back to the heart of worship, and that when you're seeing the musicians play on stage, that they are all worship leaders, absolutely. And it's not just the person on planning center that is titled worship leader, the person whose their full-time job is worship leader. But when we step on stage, we are all leading worship. And so that's kind of the biggest point of the show, and kind of my big points for what we're going to be talking about in the future. I'm really excited, and I think there's going to be a lot of good topics that we're going to talk about, and I want to hear some feedback from you guys and some questions that y'all may have about different things in worship, different questions y'all have for me about what I do or what I use, how I connect with my fellow musicians, and even the kind of things that my church does for worship, like why we use this drum set or this drum cage, or why we use tracks instead of just using the click, or why we have an MD and not just rely on the tracks. All these different kinds of things, and so I'm really excited to get into all that. But for today, the subject that we're going to be talking about is skill and musicianship in worship, and why they're not opposing each other. You know, I hear a lot of people talk about how God cares about your heart when you play, which is absolutely true. Do not get me wrong. He absolutely does care about your heart when you play. But that skill is not necessary there. And so that's the big topic today. So let's just dive into it. God, number one, cares deeply about the heart, but also He does care about skill, and He commands skill in the scriptures. Psalm 33:3 says, "Play skillfully on the strings with loud shouts." And Psalm 47:7 says, "Sing praises with a skillful psalm." And so skill is not something that's just supposed to come secondary. It comes along with it. If you care about worship and God, you want to bring your best to Him. You don't want to just come in and be like, "Oh, I have the right heart, but I'm going to play very sloppily." That means that maybe you're not coming in with the right heart. You're coming in lazy almost. And I hate to say that, but it honestly could be true. It's like some worship drummers that I've seen, they come in like half knowing the songs, but it's like they're good guys, I know them, but it's like they come in half knowing the songs, and it's like God wants your best. And so what does that mean for skill to be intertwined with worship? Let's talk about the relationship between skill and worship. And so skill is obedience to God. 1 Corinthians 10:31 says, "Whatever you do, do it all for the glory of God." And so I think God demanding skill, he's telling us that not even just in worship, but whatever we do, he doesn't want us to say you're volunteering somewhere. He doesn't want you to sloppily volunteer at this place and have a good heart for it. He wants you to do it skillfully. Or when you're talking to your friends, and you're trying to share the gospel with them, he's saying do it all for the glory of God. And so I just want to also talk about how, like, preparing for worship, you would prepare for something that you care about. I have friends that like play sports, and it's like that's what they care about. They go to practice every day. They're hitting the gym when they're not in practice. They're on the court doing the layups, doing the free throws, and it's like we should be doing that for worship as well. If this is what we care about, this is the God we serve, we should be putting in the hours, sitting at our desk playing the guitar or behind the drum set, singing our vocal warm-ups. Whatever it is, wherever you are on stage, that's what you should be doing. And so we're going to go into 1 Chronicles now, where God actually chooses these trained musicians. They were not just random people that God was just like, okay, you're going to sing. It says in 1 Chronicles 25:7, these were trained in singing to the Lord, all who were skillful. And then in 1 Chronicles 25:1, it says, David and the chiefs of service. Also, David played the harp, for context. He was a skillful harp player, as it says in the Psalms. And so he also was not just he was not just a random guy that just knew how to pluck the strings, but he actually was skilled in his worship, and he knew what he was doing. So, 1 Chronicles 25:1 says, David and the chiefs of service also set apart for the service of the sons of Asaph, who were prophesied with lyres, harps, and with cymbals. And so this just shows that, like, preparation in worship and skillfulness in worship is not a sense of, like, trying to be the best on your team or trying to be flashy for the congregation. I think it can be. I think there's an element of being able to serve the song, and we'll definitely get into that later on. But there is an element of serving the song, so it just shows that skill is not something to gloat with, but it's actually something that's biblical. And so skill actually, just like I have written down in my notes, it just says skill is actually serving the congregation. You don't want to be sloppy and distract all the congregation from what's happening in worship. You want to be able to serve the song, to serve the congregation. And so in 1 Corinthians 14:33, it says, "For God is not a God of confusion, but a God of peace." And then in 1 Corinthians 14:40, it says, "Let all things be done decently and in order." And I feel like that's just the end all be all. It's just like this is what worship should be like. Let all things. And so that's why God commands us to be skillful in worship and in musicianship, is because he's a God of order. He's not a God of chaos. He's not a God of this and that and the other. He has everything in line and everything perfectly straight ahead. And so that ties into this idea that's actually from Bob Kauflin called undistracted excellence. It's saying that you are so good at your instrument, you're so good at the guitar, so good at singing, or so good at drums, that you're able to play in such a way that it removes all the distractions, that you know how to serve the music and serve the song, serving the other musicians as well, that you're able to not distract people, to not be flashy, to know how to play the right fills and play the right lead lines, that you know what you're doing so well that you're able to just be a vessel for the Lord to use you in worship to help everybody else see God in worship. And so your level of skill is just drawing so little attention to yourself that it's like it's a payoff, because it's like you're serving the Lord because of all the time that you've put into being the best at your instrument. And so you're honoring the Lord in that way. And that's the best thing you can do on stage as a worship leader is to be praising God for who he is and what he's done with your instrument. And so that leads us into my next point, that skill actually frees us as a musician in the worship setting, because if you know your part so well and you know everybody else's part even, that's one thing that's really good for all church musicians to know, is that you should not only learn your part but all the other parts too. And I'm not saying have them down perfectly, like if you're a drummer and you don't play guitar, like I'm not saying learn the guitar to figure out all the lead lines. But if you're playing a song and you're able to match your kick drum to the lead line, or you're the bassist and there's one part where you can learn the melody, absolutely do that. I think that's one of the coolest things. And when a worship band can really lock in and they're all hitting on the same downbeat and all hitting on the same accents, like that's one of the best things. And it really is one of those things of undistracted excellence, because you're all so locked in on the click, locked in with each other, that it's like nobody's distracting, because we're all on one moving train, if that makes sense. So this actually skillfulness frees us in worship, because when we know our part so well in others' parts, we actually are able to help drive that train in worship and not ourselves be distracted. So when you're a lead vocalist, and I get it, I lose the words a lot too. I don't sing on stage, but I know what it's like. And so when the words are on the monitor, it's easy to just glue your eyes straight to the monitor so that you can like be singing and just have your eyes glued to them. But really, you should be looking at everybody else. You should be looking at your bandmates. You should be looking at the congregation, looking upward toward God. And obviously, yes, check on the monitor, but like you should know the words well enough that you shouldn't have to be glued. Same thing with guitarists, bassist, acoustic, piano. Like you should not have to have your eyes glued to the chord chart, so that it's like, oh, like what note is next? What note is next? And even drummers too. I have a rule myself that I don't keep like notes or like an iPad or anything next to me with the structure of the song. I mostly know I would know the parts pretty well for like any song, but like as far as structure goes, sometimes I'm really bad with it. And so I myself sometimes find myself looking at the monitors to see what lyrics are coming up next, so I'll know. But that's not a good habit. That's one of my own things that I should just be able to play with just the click and just know exactly what's happening. I wish I was at that level, but I'm not perfect, so I really can't do that. But I don't keep that with me because I know it would be a crutch. I know it would be something that I would have my eyes glued to, like, oh, how many bridges do we have left? Okay, there's 4 more. And then keep going. That's not a good thing. You should want to know the parts internalized so well. You're just able to keep driving the train and helping others do that too. And so, yeah, I think that's one thing that worship musicians especially rely on a lot is chord charts and the lyrics on the monitors, which can be helpful in certain songs if it's a super wordy song, like if it's the bridge to say Christ be magnified, where it's like 30 different lines. Obviously I would say it's okay to use it then, but it shouldn't be necessary. You should know what's going to happen, know what words are coming next, know what chords are coming next, know the changes and all the things. And so I also think too that skill, as much as I've talked about skill in musicianship, skill is not the most important thing in worship. I want to make that clear. As much as I've talked about skill, as high on a priority list as I've made it, it is not the end-all be-all of worship. It's up there as best thing in worship, but the goal of worship is not to perform. It's to serve. It really is to serve. It's to serve the congregation. It is to glorify God. In the end, to glorify God for who he is and what he's done. But we really should be inviting all people to worship God and not ourselves. When you play at such a high skill level that you're all over the kit and you're playing all these crazy rhythms, it's like, yeah, that's cool and that has its place, but worship is not one of them. You should be pointing upwards to God. And so that is one thing that's the goal in worship, and that I think everybody should take to heart, is that you should know that in the end, worship is not about yourself. This whole life is not about yourself, but especially worship is not about yourself. It's not about how good your notes are, not how good your chord changes are, how good your arrangement is. It is about serving God and serving his people. And so I want to leave y'all with this, some application of what is one musical weakness that you think you have. Like I said, I look at the lyrics a lot. I don't know the structure of songs too well. I typically try my best to know the structure, and I can typically get it, but it's sometimes when I go on stage and I'm a little nervous, it's like it can happen. I can forget how many bridges there are after 6 or 8 or whatever. That happens, trust me, but I want you to identify one weakness and one thing you could do better. So if your idea is like, I look at the monitors too much, well, it's like maybe start writing out the lyrics before a Sunday. You know, you're in your room Saturday night, maybe try writing out the lyrics to all the songs you're singing the next morning. Or I keep forgetting the drum parts, you know, if the tom groove is 1 and or if it's 1 and, or whatever, you know. Just try and brush up on those. Try and nail them down. I always listen to the songs on my way to church Sunday morning at 6 in the morning, so that I can just make 100% sure that I have it all down. And so to close, Matthew 25:21 says, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Keyword good. Keyword skillful. You know, God wants us to be good servants, skillful servants to the Lord. He wants us to serve him with skill and reverence. And skill doesn't make the worship more spiritual or higher or more ascended or whatever, but it can make it much clearer and much more welcoming to a congregation and easier to worship in a state of skillfulness. Thank you for listening to the Theology of Rhythm podcast. Again, my name is Reagan Canington. You can follow me on Instagram at that same name. And yeah, let me know y'all's feedback. I wanna hear what y'all have to say about this. If you have any thoughts or anything you want to question me on, feel free to DM me. I'll probably answer pretty quick. And yeah, thanks for listening. See ya.